Birds of a feather stick together, or so the saying goes. But what happens in nature isn't always what we expect to see.
A cross-species relationship is, in a sense, an evolutionary misstep because there's no biological benefit to caring for members of other species.
Nevertheless, these unexpected relationships happen. But why?
Problem is this research is all over neuroscience. And there's a lot of people, even veterinarians, that don't want to admit that animals have emotions.
Are instincts bringing these creatures together, or are they making conscious choices?
A lot of what I might argue on cross-species relationships is based on animals having rich and deep emotional lives.
We will hear different views about what these cross-species relationships tell us. Are animals consciously choosing their friends based on complex emotions, or is their behavior hardwired? Bonds formed early in life can lead to startling results. In Myrtle Beach at the Tigers Preservation Station, you'll find one odd-looking beast.
Okay. Look, I got something for you right there. There you go.
This animal is the offspring of an unexpected relationship.
This is Zeus the liger. His father is a lion and his mother is a tiger. Zeus is about 9 years old, 900 pounds, and close to 12 feet tall. Ligers are born naturally. They exist from the male lion breeding the female tiger. They are stimulation ovulators, which means they have to breed together potentially hundreds of times before the female will ovulate. To have that relationship requires that the father lion gets along with the female tiger. Usually has to take place from them being young together and them getting along, and that's in itself quite rare. Lions become very pushy and all the time want to touch and knock into each other, where tigers think that that's a little bit offensive. One doesn't become the other. They kind of meet in the middle there somehow, and that meeting in the middle gives you the opportunity that they could get along well enough to have ligers.
Clearly, this couple get along very well. They are playful, affectionate, and it's even tempting to call what we're seeing love.
Animals feel all of the same basic emotions that people do. Basic emotions are very, very deep in old parts of our brain.
These circuits in the brain that drive these emotions, it's all in the subcortex. It's all been mapped. So you have four main emotions of fear, seeking, rage, and this separation distress. And then there's also emotional circuits for play, for mother-young nurturing, and then, of course, for sex.
Are instincts and primitive emotion bringing these creatures together? Or are they making conscious choices?
If we have something, they have it too. We have stomachs, they have stomachs. We have hearts, they have hearts. If we have deep emotions, so do they, and it behooves us to go study them.
It's reasonable to say that many cross-species relationships are born of genuine emotional connections. But how likely are they to happen in the wild, where survival is a constant struggle?
If you start making cross-species friendships, the odds of you being an effective hunter or the odds of you being an effective individual at avoiding becoming somebody's dinner, you're going to break up those odds because everything else you've got to be ready and willing to eat. Otherwise, you're going to die.
Given what we know about cross-species adoptions, they probably are the exception to the rule, but not necessarily because they don't have this drive to form the relationship. It's just that conditions don't allow for it. But I'll bet you these things happen a lot more that you never see.
Where competition for food may make these relations rare, and great expanses make them hard to find, there is still concrete evidence that they exist. Until a few years ago, this wild animal was unknown to science.
The Pizzly is a polar bear grizzly hybrid. It was a myth until somebody shot one. No one genotyped it to find out that these were actually true hybrids, and of course exist over thousands of miles of territory. Very rare, but hybridization exists in the wild and always has, and it's been part of the evolutionary process.
Tigers Preservation Station in Myrtle Beach is home to an orangutan whose cross-species friendships have made headlines around the world.
Surya is about 9 years old. He's been living with me since he was born. I slowly weaned him away from his mother as he got close to a year old so that he would have a relationship with me.
Surya's unique living experience has enabled him to socialize with all sorts of species.
Surya the orangutan comes in and hangs around with tigers within the facility where the cubs are being raised. When baby animals are crying, Surya sees that and he goes to them. He wants to relieve their anxiety that's being expressed through the way they speak.
Surya's behavior suggests that he feels compassion for the cubs. But could it be something more?
I think he sees that we give care for the cubs and that we feed them and we make sure that we're tending to their needs, and thinks that participating in that is something that is favorable and that he's stepping into our tiger raising culture.
There's no doubt that animals in a sanctuary will pick up patterns from humans. There's a reciprocal relationship between human and non-human when you spend a lot of time trying to figure out who they are.
All relationships require getting to know each other.
Steady, big dog, steady.
And some take more work than others.
When the relationship started with the elephant and the orangutan, he didn't want to be near her except for the limited time while we were moving. He'd push her out of the way, he'd nip at her ears. As time went along, I think he decided that there was a way to become less of a threat to her, or her to become less of a threat to him.
Surya surprised Dog Antle with a simple gesture.
I didn't encourage it. I didn't tell him, it's time for you to feed her. I want you to give her something. I thought he would stay aloof and out of it all the time. I believe that that is a conscious choice they're making, whether that's to keep the peace or to have a relationship. They know that handing that apple over is their own choice.
Among human beings, we consider a gesture like this to be conciliatory.
In the wild, food can often be so scarce, and you've got to work very hard to get enough for yourself, and giving it away would probably cause your demise. I think that these cross-species relationships are fostered by the opportunity of the animals having their needs met.
They've got a bed, they've got health insurance in terms of veterinary care, and they've got food. So they feel safe and they're comfortable, so that might facilitate the formation of these bonds.
Surya has bonded to several animals, but there is only one that he seems to have adopted as his own, a dog named Roscoe.
I think that Surya's relationship to the dog is very similar to a relationship that human children have to dogs. That this is his dog, his property. He considers it to be his charge. Surya has this incredible way of dealing with other animals and people.
Is Surya's advanced emotional intelligence due to his primate brain power?
A chimp absolutely, definitely would have greater emotional capacity than a snake. For the simple reason that the chimpanzee has got a much bigger cerebral cortex and a much bigger brain. Do you know there's no memories in the frontal cortex? You know, walking, that's not in the frontal cortex. Breathing, remembering math, knowing how to read, none of that stuff's in the frontal cortex. What the frontal cortex does is it associates all the emotions and everything else in the brain with everything else. You see, and that's what gives you the complexity.
Yeah, so some people say, well, sure, dogs and cats and, quote, higher animals, the non-human primates, elephants, cetaceans, dolphins have, you know, complex emotions, but there's a scale that mice don't, for example. But just 5 or 6 years ago, we discovered that mice show empathy and feel the pain of other mice. So all of a sudden, if you're going to draw a line, use a pencil because you're going to erase it.
I think that Surya has his own expanded mind and consciousness. I think that he is unique among orangutan. And it's the opportunity to be born at my house, to have new experience. And that's what Surya gets, and it makes his mind become bigger and larger.
Surya's exposure to new opportunities and his experience with a variety of species has enabled him to do something most scientists consider impossible. He can swim.
I think that a hyper-smart orangutan and his capacity for understanding and expressing emotion and ideas transcends the bounds of what we normally think would take place with an animal.
We may never really know what animals are thinking, but these extraordinary relationships challenge us to accept that animals make conscious choices, motivated by emotions more complex than we ever thought possible. And their choices can lead to behavior that defies all our expectations.